Welcome to the House of Lore, a quiet place to explore the soft edges of story, history, and wonder. I'm so glad you've stopped by. Here, we drift gently through the woven tales of time, the kind just right for bedtime. If you enjoy this kind of peaceful storytelling, consider liking, subscribing, or sharing with someone who needs a calm place to land. Tonight, we begin a journey through shadows and sparks. We'll begin with one simple question. How did we first come to know fire? Not its science, not its control, but its presence, that flicker at dusk, glowing just beyond the trees, or dancing across a plain after a storm, a warmth that calls and a light that watches. This is the quiet tale of fire's first witness, not as a tool, but as a mystery. Imagine a time long ago, no lights but the stars, no roads, no walls. The world was vast and dark. Each nightfall wrapped the land in shadow, gentle but deep. And then, perhaps one night, something shimmered in the distance, a small flame rising like a golden stem from the ground. It licked the air, danced, flickered, reaching upward, as if remembering the sun. This was not the fire from a hearth. Not yet. It came from a sky-split storm, from the fury of lightning, and the hush that came after. A tree struck down in a quiet valley might smoulder a while, its embers glowing, murmuring to the eyes that dared find them, crackling, whispering. In those early moments, long before fire had a home, it lived wild, free in the wilderness, like a spirit that lit the world's edge. It was neither predator nor prey, yet it demanded reverence. Its light could comfort or destroy, and in that uncertainty, there was wonder. Perhaps the first to see it did not step too close, but felt the warmth from afar, a soft rhythm of heat in the wind, and in that warmth, a sense of safety, not to touch, not to take, but to feel, to sit beside without understanding, to be no longer lost in the dark, but resting in the company of a running flame. That flicker at dusk may have been brief, carried away in smoke before morning, but in the stillness, it left an imprint, a memory etched in shadow, and slowly something stirred. A pull toward the warmth, a quiet awe that didn't need words. Sometimes I imagine those first nights, sitting near a glowing branch, knees tucked in, the crackle echoing in the chest, heat rolling like waves, and the stars blinking softly above. It was a time when everything still had mystery, and fire was not yet tamed, but watched with wonder. As darkness draped the world, fire gave more than light. It gave focus, a place to sit and stay. Something about it drew hearts in. Even now, millennia later, we find ourselves quiet beside it, listening. And so begins our tale, the flicker at dusk, a silent beginning to what would one day shape homes, stories, and dreams. But before all that, it was just a glow, just a warmth, just a promise. In the night, there is a certain stillness that settles over the world when firelight takes center stage. Long before electricity or glowing screens, humankind gathered in the hush of evening around gentle flames that danced and wavered in the breeze. The flicker of fire is hypnotic. Its rhythm is irregular, yet graceful. No two flames are ever quite the same, and that, in itself, invites a kind of open awareness, a soft letting go of the rigid mind. Imagine a small fire glowing in the heart of a simple dwelling, or beneath the open canopy of night. Sparks rise occasionally, drifting upward like sleeping stars taking flight. The crackle floats and fades, a quiet rhythm that comforts without asking anything in return. Early minds, those of our ancestors, would have gazed into the fire not just for warmth or light, but for peace. The shapes shifting in the flames might offer visions, not spirits or omens, but gentle thoughts that shimmer at the edge of awareness. The mind has room to wander, slowly, from memory to dream, from real into imagined realms. There is no rush, only stillness. I often think that the fire gave our ancestors a mirror of their own thoughts. In the silence, in the glowing reds and golds and quiet shadows, they could begin to notice the stirrings within. Ideas were born there, not spoken but felt, resting in the soft hearthlight. Even now, thousands of years later, that experience is not lost. If you've ever watched the flame of a candle, studied a little fire as it flickers in the silence, you may know that feeling. The way time slows, the way your breathing seems to deepen without effort. It is a natural meditation, a quiet return to the self that asks nothing. The fire provides the rhythm. All we must do is listen. There is something nourishing about its presence. It warms more than the body. It warms consciousness. Resting beside the fire, our ancestors may have told stories, but there were also nights when no voice rose in speech. No tale spun aloud, only thoughts, swirling gently with the smoke. From these moments may have come the earliest dreams, not the sleep-bound ones, but those quiet flashes of insight. An image, a path, a symbol, their source unknown, their meaning deeply felt. Fire gives more than heat. It gives space, space for the inner eye to open. In our modern world, filled with constant sound, the crackle of a small fire may be the most ancient melody we still recognize. Its unpredictable rhythm can carry us effortlessly inward, to places long forgotten. Creative minds, reflective hearts, still find company in fire. To watch flame is to remember, not with precision, but with feeling. And so, even now, as you rest, imagine the soft glow of a humble fire flickering nearby. Let its warmth gently brush your awareness. Let its slow dance lull your thoughts like waves against the shore, and carry you gently into rest. In the hush of winter, fire becomes more than flame. It becomes life itself. As early humans faced the long, frozen nights, it was fire that turned frost into comfort. Imagine the cold pressing in from all sides, winds whispering through the trees, snow gathering soundlessly on the earth. Yet, in the center, a circle of warmth, a hearth, a glow. They could sleep through bitter nights, wrapped not just in furs, but in the embrace of firelight. Darkness outside, light within. This wasn't just survival. It was comfort, a small taste of security in a wide and wild world. For the very young and the very old, the fire was gentler still. Babies born into the chill of new seasons, elders whose joints ached in damp air, all found kindness in the heat. Fire protected them, warmed tiny fingers and creaky bones. In the rhythm of its crackle, they found rest. And as fire followed the heartbeats of human life, it gave something greater than just heat. It offered courage. With fire, they could venture. Step beyond the edges of familiar valleys into mountains glazed with frost, pine forests where snow clung heavy on the boughs. Without fire, the north remained unreachable. But with it, the world opened. They carried embers carefully, wrapped in moss and bark, tucked into satchels. A promise of light in the cold ahead. Camps were set, kindled anew, each spark a symbol of resilience. Through forests locked in snow and winds that howled across tundra, they were not alone. They had fire, a beacon, a trusted companion. I like to imagine those early camps, the glowing hush of firelight, faces gentle with sleep, dreams floating above a world once too cold to dream in. Because of fire, they stayed. They belonged. And now, even in our heated homes, on soft mattresses with heavy blankets, some piece of that connection remains. We still gather by hearths, still light candles in dark seasons. We still crave that same ancient warmth, the kind that touches more than skin. There's something ancient, deeply rooted, about our relationship with fire. The way it glows in the darkness, the way it crackles, responding quietly to the night. Tonight, I'd like to wander gently into the role fire has played, not just in warming our hands or cooking meals, but in keeping watch for us as a guardian through the long hours of darkness. Long before electric light or locks on doors, people huddled close to flames, not just out of habit, but out of necessity. The wilderness at night could be unpredictable, yet the fire drew an invisible line around the edge of safety. Many nocturnal animals have a healthy respect for fire. Even formidable predators, like big cats, panthers, leopards, and lions, are reluctant to come too close. Their senses may be sharper in the dark, but when they see the flickering edge of a flame, something primal pulls them back. That glow, unpredictable and alive, says danger even to them. The firelight doesn't just keep them away, it gives us something equally powerful, a sense of control. Looking into the rhythmic dance of the flames, we find focus. We find reassurance, even when the night is vast and wild beyond its reach. In old stories passed down through generations, the fire was the center of the camp. It faced outwards, never closing in, always watching. Imagine travelers gathered under open skies, encircled by silence, and yet holding within their firelight a kind of serene authority. Even now, in places where people still live close to the land, fire continues in this quiet role. Not aggressive, not loud, simply present, unfolding in slow flickers, holding the darkness just a few steps away. When I think about setting up camp for the night, I often picture the fire first. Not just a place to gather warmth, but as a border, a circle of light gently telling the night, this space is claimed and watched. So, as your thoughts drift and the hush of evening wraps around you, picture that gentle fire at your side, not burning high, not wild, just steady, still, and quietly keeping whatever shadows might wander just at bay. In the quiet ages before iron and steel, before anvils rang and hammers sparked, fire was already at work, not just warming hands and cooking meals, but shaping the very tools that would shape the world. Let me take you back to these early flickers of human innovation, where the glow of flame guided more than just light. Picture a piece of wood held carefully near the coals. The hunter, crouched by the fire, slowly turns the pointed end over the heat. Not too close, just enough. The fibers harden. The sap retreats. A humble stick becomes something more, a spear, resistant to splintering, stronger than it was before. This was one of the oldest marriages between nature and fire. A sharpened branch transformed, not by cutting, but by slow roasting. The flame taught us that refinement didn't demand force. It required patience. Fire gave us more than hardened points. It whispered secrets to stone. Beneath heat, certain rocks would crack. Just so. Hidden fractures revealed paths for the napper's hand. What was once unpredictable became purposeful. Obsidian, flint, and chert, materials for early blades, could be prepared through fire, softened or split ahead of the artisan's strike. This idea of pre-treating stone with flame often began as an accident. Rocks set in a hearth, bursting apart with a sudden pop. But from that surprise, patience grew, and eventually, understanding. Even the earth itself began to change beneath the flame. When patches of clay were exposed to fire and its ashen bed, something magical happened. The soft gave way to the solid. Ash mingled with raw soil, stabilizing it, strengthening it. Bricks began without knowing they were bricks. Bowls hardened into the first containers, the first cradles of food and water. In every instance, the secret thread was heat. Controlled, watched, fed. Fire became the artisan's assistant, the invisible tool that unlocked potential hidden in wood, stone, and earth. And so, as we trace these early sparks of technology, we see more than invention. We see a conversation between humans and flame, one that continues, even now. In the quiet flicker of firelight, long before the written word, before even the first rooftops rose, there was the hearth, and beside it, the hands of early humans worked with earth and flame, not in haste, but with the gentle curiosity that so often marks the beginnings of something grand. Clay, soft and dense, pulled from riverbanks and pond edges. Someone someday pressed it between their fingers and shaped it. Perhaps at first, just for play. But over time, shape became vessel. Hollow bowls cupped by two hands, holding water, seeds, memories. Placed too near the fire, one might have shattered. But another, set just right among the coals, would emerge solid, strengthened, changed by heat. The moment was quiet, but it echoed forward through centuries. Fired clay became the first form of technology to endure time, a true transformation of the elements. Earth, air, water, and fire, bound together in practice. And then came metal, hidden deep in lumps of rock and soil, waiting to be coaxed out. The earliest metals were soft and rare, gold and copper, malleable treasures warmed by open flame. But as skill grew, so did boldness. Someone looked at those heavy stones and saw something more. Ore, not just rock, but promise. With fire hot enough, those stones would bleed molten metal. Bronze came first, an alloy of copper and tin. Stronger than what came before, it shaped weapons, tools, and beauty alike. Simple fires became forges. Bellows breathed life into embers. The glow of transformation lit the faces of craftsmen all across the early world. And then iron, harder to summon, but mightier with patience. From dark, heavy ore, smelted and refined, the Iron Age took shape. Everything shifted. Homes, harvests, and highways, all made possible by stronger tools and sturdier hopes. The fire at the center of each settlement became more than warmth. It was an engine of change. These fires, once humble, offered more than cooked meals. They unlocked something. The idea that raw materials, when treated with time, patience, and care, could become something new. Every pot, every blade, every pressed and burnished ornament, they were not only useful, they were expressions of skill. of art, of craft. So when we look back at the rise of civilization, it's tempting to think of grand monuments or written scrolls. But perhaps more enduring was the simple, steady rise of the artisan, the potter with ash-stained fingers, the blacksmith beside the glowing forge, the quiet click of shaped stone against metal, generations, building on generations, around the warmth of fire, and still, to this day, we feel some quiet comfort in the touch of clay, the resonance of iron and the glow of flame. These old companions, shaped by ancestral hands, continue to whisper through time, carried to us on the breath of glowing embers. Fire has always fascinated us. Its warmth, its movement, the quiet language of light and burn. In spiritual and ceremonial practice, fire rises as more than just a flicker of combustion. It becomes a symbol, a calling, and, some say, a doorway. I often imagine a solitary flame glowing in the hush of a temple, a steady point of presence, like a heartbeat in the dark. Throughout history, flames have been part of offerings, not only gifts of food and incense, but prayers themselves were once believed to ride the smoke, lifting to the heavens. A simple candle lit before a shrine, or a bonfire raised to mark the turning of seasons, becomes more than ceremony. It becomes connection. In so many cultures, fire was thought to speak both to this world and the next. The crackle of burning wood was more than a sound. It was said to be a voice, the voice of transformation, of presence unseen. Some flames were never meant to go out. Eternal fires, watched over with reverence and care, passed from one generation of guardians to the next. In Zoroastrian temples, sacred flames have burned for hundreds of years, gently tended by priests who learned the language of care through silent routine. In ancient Rome, the Vestal Virgins preserved a fire sacred to Vesta, the goddess of hearth and home. That flame was more than ritual. It was the spirit of the state itself. If it died, it was said, misfortune would follow. But it isn't just the historic or the ancient that holds fire dear. Even today, we light a flame during remembrance. A single candle burning on a mantle, a torch that marks a promise or cause, a fire ring in a circle of friends, watching stars rise slowly overhead. In each quiet glow, there's something more than heat, more than light. There's presence, memory, meaning. Fire is both fragile and eternal. It requires tending, attention, careful trust, and in return, it gives us warmth, guidance, and perhaps, just perhaps, a sense that we are not fully alone. There is peace in flame. Even as it moves, it soothes. A perfect partner for a quiet night, wrapped in light, ready to rest beneath the stars. Night after night, across time and distance, people have gathered around fire. Its gentle flicker has drawn us close, with warmth, safety, and something deeper. A quiet kind of remembering. When I think of ancient stories, I picture them born in flame. Voices low and steady, rising and falling like distant wind. The kind of stories that didn't come from books, but from mouths and hearts, passed forward, not because they were written, but because they were told. Out under a wide night sky, stars overhead glimmering faintly. It's easy to imagine generations gathered in small circles, shared silence broken by soft laughter, by rustling feet upon the earth, and by the sound of a storyteller's voice. They would speak of ancestors and animals, of earth and spirit, their voices blending with the crackle of the fire. the flickering light playing across faces, across furrowed brows and listening eyes. The fire became more than flame. It became a keeper, a container of memory, not just of warmth, but of wisdom. Sometimes it was the elders, their words slow but sure. Sometimes it was children learning to tell these tales, just as they'd once heard them. And through it all, the fire, constant, gentle, alive. There's a rhythm to stories told by firelight, a cadence shaped by the moment, by the breath between words, by the silence in between. The light and shadow on the speaker's face dances as if the memory itself is flickering into being. Even the fire seems to listen, as if it carries these stories upward into the night sky, or downward into the quiet memory of the earth. In many traditions, the fire isn't just a place for stories to be told. It's a being of its own, a kind of spirit that remembers what we forget, a collaborator in the passing on of knowledge. These tales didn't always end with a lesson. Sometimes they were simply moments remembered, a hunter's quiet triumph, a song hummed under a mother's breath, a journey carried across the miles by story alone. And in each retelling, they were reshaped, not lost, but lived anew, woven with the listener's own imagination, their own questions. That's part of what made them last. So then, the fire did more than warm the night. It offered a space, a sanctuary, for memory to unfold and take shape again. Softly, slowly, like embers that glow long after the flames have gone. Long before the hum of machines or the glow of screens, there was fire, flickering, crackling. Warm and alive, it danced through shadows and whispered its own kind of wisdom. And tonight, I'd like to sit with you beside that ancient light, to reflect, quietly, on how fire reshaped what it means to be human. Fire did more than warm our hands. It warmed our imagination. With every spark, a new possibility. It made the night less fearsome, and gave us time to think, to talk, to dream. Around its steady glow, people began to shape stories. And with those stories came ideas. Ideas that grew into tools, instruments, and eventually inventions. Fire softened materials, forged iron, and tempered creativity. The blacksmith shaped more than metal. He shaped futures. And the cook at the hearth? She transformed raw life into nourishment and comfort. Flame was no longer only survival. It had become creation. But fire has always spoken in two voices. One warm, and the other stern. It glows, yes, but it also burns. That flickering line between tool and danger has always demanded respect. Even the earliest humans understood. The same fire that cooked their meal could also consume their shelter. That dual nature became a teacher, one that taught patience, care, and the value of restraint. Our ancestors watched the flame's rhythm, its breath-like sway. In its dance, they saw mystery, and perhaps something sacred. Fire was never simply a physical thing. It shaped not just landscapes, but the inner paths of the soul. To sit quietly by the fire was to be reminded of something ancient and shared. A thread running through all of us, warming not just our bodies, but our stories, our spirit. Even now, in a world of electric lights and digital sparks, we still lean toward fire. Candlelight, hearths, bonfires, each one a soft echo of the first ignition, reminding us where we came from and what warmth truly means. So as you drift tonight, imagine a small flame gently flickering. Imagine its stories, its wisdom, and its steady breath of glow beneath an ancient sky. The flame within us still burns. Even in our modern world of electric lights and central heating, the glow of fire still calls to something ancient within us. It speaks in the flicker of a candle and the gentle crackle of a hearth warming a quiet room. Fireplaces today may not be the absolute necessity they once were, but their presence remains comforting. Whether wood-burning or purely decorative, they offer more than heat. They offer company. In the soft orange light, the walls feel closer somehow, less like structures and more like protection, curling up with a blanket in the near silence, hearing only the murmur of flames. It's a special kind of release. Thought slows down. The body unwinds. Then there's candlelight, delicate by nature, yet deeply symbolic. A single lit candle can soften the edges of a room, turning it from ordinary to sacred. We light them for many reasons. For birthdays, for prayers, for moments when a certain warmth is needed. To light a candle is to say, this moment matters. It creates a pause, a space between now and next. Sometimes it's for memory, sometimes for love, and sometimes just for the quiet itself. Fire, very gently, holds our stories. It warms us, feeds us, lights the dark, and reminds us of our human need to gather. Even if the hearth is now electric or purely symbolic, the meaning hasn't faded. It has simply evolved. A fireplace in the corner, or a few candles on the windowsill, they are today's hearths. They continue to offer the soft comfort of fire, without asking for anything in return. They ask only that we notice them, sit quietly, and allow the warmth to settle around us like a whisper. As we begin to close the circle, I find myself tracing the winding path of humanity by the glow of ancient firelight. From the first sparks drawn from stones to the steady embers that warmed our earliest shelters, fire has walked beside us, step by step. Not as a wild force, always, but as a quiet companion. Its warmth lingered in the corners of caves. Its flickering light danced on the stone walls of early hearths. Storytelling, cooking, comfort, all grew more intimate beneath its glow. When I think of our journey, of everything we've built, touched and shaped, it is fire that marks each chapter. A torch lit in the dark forest, a campfire beneath starlit skies, a kiln, a forge, a lighthouse flame, and then cities rising up from the ashes of simple fires. Homes built not just of wood and stone, but warmed by the controlled breath of flame. Streets lit with soft amber lamps, lanterns swinging gently from posts beneath the night sky. We moved further, and fire came with us, in steam engines, in signal lights, in the pulse of industry. Each ember becomes a milestone, each flame a memory etched into our shared story. But fire is not only in what we have built. It has shaped who we are. It encouraged us to gather, to wait for warmth together, to speak in hushed tones beneath the canopy of stars. It invited us to imagine, to dream of comfort, of civilization, of tomorrow. Even now, though we've wrapped technology around us like a second skin, fire still whispers in quiet places, a candle at the bedside, a chimney's curl of smoke, the soft click of a stove before it glows warm blue. I often imagine those first flames coaxed from dry grass and flint, and I think, Perhaps that was the moment we became something new. Not just beings of instinct and survival, but dreamers, builders of a wider world. Fire did not just keep us warm. It gave us the courage to step forward into the unknown, to watch a spark turn to glow and say, yes, this will lead us home. In this way, the flame still burns, not only in hearths, but in memory, in tradition, in the soft rhythm of nightfall itself. Each light in the darkness is a continuation of an ancient gift, and as the world quiets around us, as sleep draws near, that flame continues to glow, gentle, steady, always with us. Out beyond the reach of the villages and shelters, beneath vast, ancient skies, there were storms, crackling and alive with a charged energy. These tempests swept across the land, stirring the branches of trees, rattling leaves, and soaking the earth with cold rain and distant thunder. But now and again, the skies did more than just roar. Now and again, a flash, bright and fierce, split the darkness in two, a lightning bolt. It lanced from cloud to ground with a force that shook the air itself. A sudden hiss of fire, a tree struck down, and flaming, early hominins, long before writing, long before flame was a tool, may have watched from sheltered rocks or forest edges. The fire, to them, must have seemed like something unearthly, alive, devouring bark, leaf, and branch, while casting dancing shadows into the trees. In the earliest moments, the glow of fire drew the eye with a strange pull. One could imagine them watching, still, as the blaze flickered and grew. It was not simply heat or smoke, but movement. The flames leaned and spiraled, red and gold threads woven into the air, as wind whispered through the canopy. Fear, likely, came first. The crackling noise, unpredictable. The scent of burning, sharp and unfamiliar. Many may have turned away, retreating to cooler, darker places, keeping distance until the fire faded and only ash remained. But some, perhaps, lingered, watched. Though they could not yet hold fire or call it into being, their presence at its edge marked something new in the long story of our kind. Not just survival, but awareness. A slow recognition that this force, so wild and dangerous, was also beautiful. That from the smouldering branches, warmth lingered and light. Storms would come again, lightning would strike again, and each time, perhaps, early humans, our silent, watchful ancestors, stepped a little closer, their breath caught in the cold air, their eyes reflecting firelight beneath the broken sky. They may have spoken quietly to one another, or simply sat in silence, listening to the soft roar of a fire that had not been built, but simply was, a flickering beginning to the long and glowing road of fire and thought. The fire has burned down low now. Its crackle is softer, more like a whisper than a song, and the shadows it cast on the walls have gentled into stillness. There's a glow, though, that lingers, a smouldering hush that wraps the room in a quiet warmth. We sit in that afterglow, together, letting the last embers of light guide our thoughts into a slow and steady drift. With each breath, I feel the rhythm of rest drawing nearer. Like ashes cooling after their dance, my thoughts settle and soften. In and out, slow and deep, breathing not with urgency, but with ease, letting the quiet lead me. When I was a child, I used to lie by the hearth, long after everyone else had gone to bed. The coals were like secret lanterns, glowing silently, inviting me to imagine. Old stories, half-remembered dreams. It felt like the world paused for a while and gave me permission to do the same. And maybe that's what this night is asking of us too. To pause, to exhale, to remember only what brings warmth as sleep begins to settle over the mind. Let the glow carry you, not with brightness, but with a quiet hum, as if the world itself were humming a lullaby. Let it soften you from the corners inward. Let your eyes grow heavier with each comfortable breath. Somewhere deep in the folds of night, there is a stillness that holds your name. A place where memories are not sharp, but smooth with time, wrapped in the kind of light only dreams remember. And now the time is near to let yourself go there, to drift with the glow, to rise with the warmth of something unspoken, to rest. Good night, and may your sleep be gentle. In the earliest days of human memory, long before written words or tools made of iron, there came a moment of profound quiet. Just after the setting sun had vanished behind the trees and the darkness sank gently across the land. In that hush, there was a glow. And in that glow, warmth. The first fires were not made by human hands. They came with lightning, tangled in dry leaves, or breathed up from the deep earth. At first, fire was a distant stranger, foreboding, untamed. But slowly, very slowly, something began to change. Drawn first by curiosity, perhaps, or the flickering light spotted across a clearing. Early people stood at a distance, watching the flames dance among the wood, hearing the soft crackle and feeling a warmth that reached across the chill of twilight and beckoned. What must it have felt like to step closer? A cautious foot on soft earth, eyes wide, breaths slow. Not yet daring to touch, but not running away either. The warmth was not just physical. It was comforting, centered. A quiet pulse at the heart of night. The first to sit by a fire were likely not much different from you or me, really. Cold air against their skin, tired legs folded beneath them, finding their place close to the glow. Perhaps they wrapped themselves in furs, or shared body heat. But around the fire, there was a new closeness, a place to rest and linger. At first, fire may have been chance, but those who remembered where it last appeared may have returned again. In those quiet visits, trust formed slowly. Gradually, over many nights, humans began to tolerate the flame's presence, its gentle nature, inviting them nearer than ever before. They learned its moods. Too much fuel and it roared. Too little and it wept into embers. But kept just right, it flickered steadily, crackling softly like tender whispers. And so the campfire was born, not just as a source of heat or light, but as a circle, a place where people drew close, not only to warmth, but to each other. Evenings were no longer only for sleep or silence. They became a time of shared breath, shared story, and quiet understanding. The fire was the still point, a soft heart blazing in the dark. When I imagine those first fireside gatherings, I think of slow blinks, deep sighs, gentle voices passing between the crackles. And in that hush, a people awakening not just to survival, but to presence. They were no longer looking out into the black unknown. They were turning inward, drawn close to something kinder, something tender, something warm. There was a time, long before matches and lighters, when fire was not made by spark or flame, but instead kept alive. Sacred and fragile, the ember, that glowing heart of fire, became something early humans learned to carry, protect, and nurture. I find comfort in imagining it. Small fires dotting the ancient world, tended patiently by quiet hands. Fire was not always readily available, so once a flame was found, whether from lightning, volcanic rock, or smouldering trees, it became a precious ally. It had to be preserved. The ember would become the seed of warmth, protection, and survival. Rather than risk the hardship of fire creation each time, early humans learned to transport it, not as open flame, but as a slow-burning ember, cradled in careful materials. Wrapped in dried moss, or nestled in bark and carried in hollowed-out horn or stone, the ember was kept breathing quietly. People learned to give it just the right amount of air, not so much that it would burst into flame, and not so little that it would vanish into cold ash, like carrying sleeping breath inside their hands. When the group moved, across hills, through forests, or along winding rivers, the ember came with them. Someone always watched it. Often it was the task of an elder, or a child, those too aged or too young to hunt. And so the ember passed between hands, warm and living. When the group stopped to rest, the ember could be fed again. Bits of dry grass, thin twigs, the whisper of a dry leaf. Slowly, gently, the ember would catch, glowing brighter, until flame returned. In the quiet of night, that glow was a kind of heartbeat. Roles began to form around the tending of fire. It wasn't a task for just anyone. Those who understood the rhythms of heat and smoke, of sparks and fuel, they became the keepers. Their fingers smelled of wood and wind. Their breath knew when to blow soft and when to wait. Even now, I imagine their faces in the glow, shadows playing across weathered skin, eyes focused and steady. They were not making fire, they were guiding it. Over time, the art of keeping the ember alive became more than a necessity. It became a ritual, a story passed from hand to hand, just as the ember was. And in every village fire, every cooking flame, every flicker through the dark, was the memory of someone who once carried heat, quiet and glowing, through the wilderness. The ember was never just a spark. It was legacy, warmth and wisdom, carried forward, one breath at a time. When we trace the quiet flicker of firelight back through time, we find it nestled deep within ancient caves, where early humankind began to shape the world around them. Some of the earliest hearths were simple, yet deeply purposeful. Stones arranged in a circle on the dirt floor of a cave, encircling coals that warmed the darkness and brought light to hollow stone walls. These were more than fires. They were gathering places, soft anchors in long periods of night. The hearth became a kind of boundary, a place where wildness yielded to warmth, where shadow fell back and breath became visible in its embrace. Lined with stone, these early hearths protected flame from the shifting air and collected the heat in the center of life's small circle. There is something deeply calming in knowing that those first hearths were not accidents. They were made intentionally, carefully. Someone arranged those stones. Someone returned each morning to stir the embers. Someone chose the spot, not only for shelter, but for how the smoke found its path. Some caves had openings high in the rock, natural vents that carried smoke upward and away. Over time, this may have led people to seek out such places more often, spaces that didn't choke from smoke, but breathed gently alongside the fire, a quiet kind of airflow, discovered long before chimneys ever rose above rooftops. In those early places, warm fire and cool stone found balance. The hearth was no longer something to move from place to place. It was a fixed part of the home, a central steadiness, anchoring life inside the cave, and with that came something new, a sense of permanence, a place where warmth would return each night, a circle of stone waiting for flame, waiting to be fed, just as it had been the night before. This was more than survival. It was the beginning of tradition and of memory. I like to imagine them there, sitting by the crackling glow, soft shadows brushing the walls, wrapped in furs, sharing stories or silence. The first hearths lit more than stone chambers. They lit time itself, quiet moments stretching across the centuries. The hearth gave more than heat. It gave shape. It gave comfort. Even now, in our walls of plaster and brick, we carry echoes of that first fire, the need to gather around warmth, the calm that settles when flame is steady, and we can rest beside it. In the hush of a cave long ago, a stone-lined ring glowed gently, and something very old, very human, began to unfold. For most of our early journey as a species, food was raw, tough, and often difficult to break down. Our ancestors would gnaw at roots and chew dry meat with anxious jaws, grinding away at what nature offered. It wasn't always kind to our teeth nor to our stomachs. But then, one gentle light changed everything. Fire. What began perhaps as a spark, struck by accident, became a tool of transformation. Slowly, carefully, it altered what we ate, how we lived, and how we connected. Cooking had arrived, and with it, a quiet revolution. When early humans first leaned in toward warm flames, roasting meat over glowing embers, they discovered more than heat. The meat grew soft, its fibers unwound by the gentle caress of fire. What once resisted tooth and tongue now yielded, easily torn, easily eaten, and tubers, those stubborn roots pulled from the earth, no longer sat heavy and raw in the gut. They softened. They sweetened. Their hidden strength released through heat. Fire made food kind, easier to chew, quicker to digest, and richer in nourishment. Nutrients that once slept behind tough barriers were now freed. Proteins unfolded. Sugars emerged. Our bodies could absorb more and spend less energy trying. Slowly, over generations, our jaws grew smaller. Our teeth changed. Our guts adapted. All thanks to the quiet hand of cooking. But beyond what it did to our bodies, fire brought us closer. Meals were no longer scavenged alone, eaten quickly and hurried away. They were shared, prepared together, eaten together. The glowing heart of a fire drew humans into its circle. There, seated close, they passed food, told stories, and began to define what it meant to be a part of something. Fire didn't just alter food. It became the center of community, a quiet hearth that warmed body and spirit alike. Through cooking, we gained time, strength, and connection. And though it happened slowly across tens of thousands of years, its warmth still lingers in the way we gather, share, and nourish not just ourselves, but one another. In the flicker of fire and the scent of roasted roots and game, we stepped into a softer world, a world we made a little gentler, with every meal. As I drift deeper into the quiet rhythm of this ancient tale, I find myself reflecting on a moment in deep time, a crossroads where our early ancestors began to change not just their habits, but the very shape of their minds. In earlier days, food came raw and tough. The simple act of chewing could take hours. Hours every single day, spent pulling nutrients from fibrous roots, dense leaves, and chunks of uncooked meat. But then, quietly, beautifully, came fire. Not just for warmth, not just for light, but for cooking. Cooking transformed our food. It coaxed out energy that was once locked away behind tough cell walls. With every meal made softer and more digestible, our ancestors used less energy to digest and more to do other things. Imagine that. Suddenly, nature asked less of the stomach, and more could be given to the brain. Over generations, this shift would gently steer the course of human evolution. Guts began to shrink, not so drastically at first, but enough to make space behind the scenes for something extraordinary, a brain that could afford to grow. In terms of biology, the brain is costly. It requires a generous flow of energy to keep humming along, and in a world of raw food and tough digestion, that fuel was hard to come by. But cooked food made it easier. Easier to nourish the body, and easier to nourish thought. So, with more energy available and fewer hours spent chewing and digesting, what else did our ancestors begin to do? They watched, they wondered, they played. Time once spent grinding through raw roots could now be passed under the stars, beside the fire, thinking, sharing, dreaming. The rhythm of their lives shifted, not all at once, but over the slow stretch of generations. It's gentle to imagine. Small hands shaping tools instead of ripping bark, curious minds piecing together songs and language and memory. With each season that passed, cooking gave humans the gift of time, and time gave rise to thought. That simple shift, from chewing to thinking, would become one of the softest yet most powerful turns in our story. And even now, its warmth glows quietly, deep at the heart of every fire, every kitchen, every gentle evening meal. As the sun slipped beneath the horizon, and the world fell into darkness, the hearth became a sanctuary of light and warmth. The flickering fire was more than a tool. It was a quiet companion, casting its golden glow along the cave walls, and inviting shapes to come alive in the dancing shadows. I imagined those early humans, settling in a circle, eyes reflecting to the flames, locked not just on the fire, but on each other. This was more than survival. It was connection. The fire seemed to draw people together naturally. Its warmth invited stories to rise, gently spoken into the night. Tales of the hunt, legends of ancestors, and dreams folded in quiet murmurs filled the dark spaces between the trees and stars. Through stories, the past lingered, not lost to time, but lovingly passed hand to hand like a shared ember. Each voice added its own brushstroke to the mural of memory, forming a tapestry that could survive beyond any single lifetime. This was the earliest form of culture, gentle, unspoken, but deeply felt. And there were the shadows, strange and wonderful companions, both real and imagined. When the fire sparked and flared, the shadows leapt across cave walls, acting out the myths and tales brought to life by ancient tongues. Children with wide eyes watched them like charmed audiences, as the dark corners flickered with mystery. It was this nightly theatre, performed not on a stage, but within the hush of a shared silence, that wove hearts closer. A gathering at the fire was a ritual, informal, but sacred in its own quiet way. The flames encouraged stillness, conversation, soft laughter. It soothed tempers. It offered a space for reflection, a place to sit shoulder to shoulder with kin or stranger, and know, even for a moment, the safety of belonging. Perhaps it was the warmth, or the way light and shadow danced just so. Or maybe it was the hush and rhythm of firewood crackling, urging people to listen and to speak, whatever the cause. The fire became the beating heart of early society, where bonds were formed in quiet understanding, and voices, old and young, became threads in the same warm tapestry. As evening descended on the sharing circles of long ago, something remarkable began to stir. Around quiet fires, in the hush of twilight, people gathered together in calm and comfort. In those moments, between the last light of day and the deep dark of night, minds were open, attentive, and ready to explore new ways of connecting. Imagine the flicker of flames casting soft shadows across faces, the warmth drawing everyone close. It was here, in this gentle, shared space, that the building blocks of language may have quietly begun, not with sudden revelation or grand invention, but with small, curious attempts. One might mimic the call of a bird heard earlier that day. A child might repeat it with a smile, adding a lilt or twist of their own. Another might gesture, a hand fluttering like wings, and laughter would follow, soft and communal. These acts, simple and playful, may have served a far deeper purpose. They were practice, experiments in shaping sound and meaning. In the repetition and rhythm shared at night, these sounds grew more precise, more deliberate. Gestures were essential, too. Early humans relied on them long before voice could carry structured thought. A pointed finger, wide eyes, the sweep of a hand, they conveyed stories, cautions, joys. But as fireside gatherings brought people nearer, voice stepped eagerly beside motion. Lips began to shape the gestures, not just echoing with movement, but articulating them with growing sounds. This was not about utility alone. It was about connection, the yearning to be understood, to share something of one's own experience, no matter how small. Around the fire, where safety lived for a while, this expression could flourish without fear. In some circles, there may be quiet humming. Not structured song, perhaps, just the memory of wind between tall grasses, or the rustle of leaves in mimicked tones. These gentle attempts to recreate the sounds of nature bound the people to their world and to one another. Distinct sounds began to carry shared meanings. A particular hum for the soft-footed predator, a sharp click for water passing over stone. Sound became pattern, pattern became memory, and memory became story. It may be that storytelling and spoken language, like close siblings, emerged side by side. One encouraged the other to grow. Around the fire, a person might reenact the chase of an animal, with gestures at first, then scattered sounds, until slowly the memory took shape in shared words. These moments were not performances. They were gifts. And those who listened in the hush of evening received far more than tales. They received the shape of meaning. In story, they found caution, imagination, bonds, Language, even in its earliest hum and gesture, gave form to thought. And all of it began there, by the low crackle of firelight, in the still and listening dark.